Hello everyone, I'm Alec Farquhar. I'm on the Steering Committee of Disability in Work Canada. I'm introducing a panel session called Using the COVID-19 Recovery to Increase Employment of Persons with Disabilities, Wednesday, November 25th, 1:20 to 2:20 Eastern. And this is one of several presentations at our conference focusing on the terrible impact that COVID-19 has had, especially on those most vulnerable in society, including, of course, persons with disabilities. And this has included a really significant employment impact. We have to find effective responses to ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind in the COVID-19 recovery. And can we think beyond that to use the recovery to actually increase employment of persons with disabilities? That's what this session's about. We're going to explore the impacts in more detail. We're going to look at some really innovative ideas for solutions. And I think you'll find it's a very stimulating and important conversation that we'll be having. There will be two pre-recorded presentations, followed by a live presentation and then a live Q&A session. The first recorded presentation is from Shawn Raaf, Research Director, Social Research and Demonstration Corporation, and Laura Celeste, researcher for the evaluation of BC Partners in Workforce Innovation. And they'll be speaking about insights into the impact of COVID-19 on the employment experience. Basically taking a lot of their information from a survey done by BC Partners in Workforce Innovation to capture insights into the employment-related challenges that people with disabilities are experiencing during the pandemic. But then a practical element, how they're using those findings to inform a better approach to supporting BC employers to meet their workforce needs by hiring more inclusively and by connecting people with disabilities to available employment opportunities. Following this presentation, we'll be hearing from a team at University of Guelph. Their project is called From Invisibility to Inclusion. It focuses on episodic disabilities, and they're part of Revision, the Center for Art and Social Justice at Guelph. Their presentation is called Accessibility is Adaptability, Lessons from Episodic Disability Inclusion for the COVID-19 Crisis and Beyond. Our presenters are Lacey, Croft, Elisabeth Harrison, and Carla Rice. And their position descriptions and bios are in the materials. They'll be focusing on how learnings from dealing with episodic disabilities can give us some ideas for responding to the big challenge of a pandemic crisis.
Hello, my name is Shawn Raaf, and together with my colleague Laura Celeste, we are joining you today from the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation. Today, we will be presenting the results of a small study we just completed that is providing some important insights into the impact that COVID-19 is having on the employment experiences of people with disabilities here in British Columbia. Our team at SRDC is currently leading a research initiative called the BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, or as we like to call it, BC WIN. This project originally began in 2013, but over the past 2 years, it has benefited from funding through the Federal Opportunities Fund. The project team is made up of SRDC as a project manager and research partner, and McLeod Silver HR Business Partners, who lead the Inclusive Workforce Consultant team. And this is a group of HR experts in recruitment that liaise between employers, job seekers, and service providers. We're all engaged in this project. BC WIN is a unique approach to supporting people with disabilities in the area of employment, as it is a demand-based approach, meaning it starts with engaging employers who have job openings and then identifying candidates who can fill those positions through a large network of service partners throughout the lower mainland of BC. When there are openings that are distributed through our network, recruitment campaigns are launched to our service partners who refer candidates to an inclusive workforce consultant, who then interviews and recommends qualified candidates to employers. BC WIN therefore acts as an intermediary, and our primary client is the employer. Any accommodations to prepare the job seeker take on the role are provided as needed by our referring service organization. So our primary task is really about supporting our employers to find the right candidates to fill their roles. This HR approach seems to have worked really well for both our employer partners and job seekers who have been matched for employment, as we have been experiencing retention rates at about 90%, which is incredibly high. The aim of the project is to assess how enhanced employer supports and supported workplace experiences can enable BC employers to achieve their diversity, equity, and inclusion objectives. It also has a specific goal to facilitate long-term career opportunities for at least 100 job seekers with disabilities through this job matching process. BC Win is currently working with 11 employer partners and nearly 100 service partners throughout the Lower Mainland. As we are all aware, COVID has had a major impact on employment, particularly among populations that are more vulnerable due to pre-existing conditions, lower skills, or who are working in sectors that have been hardest hit by the shutdown. While our IWC team has worked closely with our employers through the initial shutdown, we began to notice a significant decline in referrals from our service partners as opportunities started being circulated again in the spring. This trend has continued well into the summer, and through conversations with our service partners, we are hearing that they are having challenges re-engaging clients for a variety of reasons. As we look for explanations of how the pandemic is affecting people with disabilities in particular, we were having challenges finding specific information that can really speak to the specific issues that people with disabilities are having right now in the current labor market. From these experiences, the BC Win team decided to poll our service partners to gain a better understanding of the specific issues that are preventing people with disabilities from being willing or able to work at this time. While the results of this survey, which we'll present to you today, will play an important role in how BC Win changes its approach to engaging people with disabilities in the coming months, we are pleased to share out these results as a way of engaging a broader audience in what we have learned through our network here in BC.
So the survey was an opportunity to capture this real-time responses from service providers who are on the ground in BC to identify what's been impacting employment decisions with people with disabilities, and if anything, what could be done to help address that. So the survey itself was sent out to BC Win's service provider network across BC, and it contained questions for service providers to answer about the current impacts of COVID-19 on their clients with disabilities employment experiences. 20 service providers and social enterprises in BC responded, reporting on their clients with disabilities. So per service provider, there was a range from 11 clients up to 85 clients, with an average of about 35 clients being served per provider. So this totaled for our survey 556 clients. And for, so the research is essentially a qualitative study to understand these experiences and should not be considered representative of all clients of job seekers in BC. But for the survey results, we report the findings by the number of clients rather than the number of service providers, because our focus is on the clients themselves. So therefore, we have weighted all of our results to more accurately reflect the number of clients being impacted in this area. So the service providers in this study all covered a wide range of employment services they offered to their clients. And as we can see here in this graph, they've reported a wide range of services. Most clients were offered employment readiness programming at 78%, followed by social enterprise employment or work experiences, which 36% of clients were receiving. This was followed by Work BC services at 27%, or assistive technology supports, 22%, and mental health, rehabilitation, and individual placement supports were around 20%. So when we asked how clients were disengaging from employment-related activities, we found that of their 556 clients, 93% were not wanting to accept or return to available employment opportunities. We found that 89% were not currently seeking employment, 52% were no longer engaging with their organization, and 44% mentioned other issues at the moment. So what we could see is that during COVID-19, clients were not actually fully disengaged with the services, but actually just disengaging with the employment-related opportunities at this moment. When we asked the reason that clients were disengaging, they had indicated that there were a few reasons that stood out. So we noticed that 45% of clients mentioned a decrease in motivation from stress or anxieties due to COVID-19. We found that 41% noted a personal health concern related to COVID-19. And clients were also concerned about exposure to COVID-19 in the workplace and on public transit. Almost a third of the clients listed family concerns or uncertainty of job security, and a quarter of clients indicated concerns about vulnerable family members or family responsibilities. Interestingly, though, we found that clients were the least concerned with losing access to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or the CERB, or disability assistance. And this finding was unexpected because based on some of the concern from the wider public, we see here that actually it's not that job seekers have decided not to work because they are receiving benefits, but it's rather a decreased motivation and health concerns that are really leading the reasons for disengagement from employment during COVID-19. And lastly, when we asked for further insights about clients' disengagement from employment, service providers highlighted around 4 main themes that we found: safety, anxiety, vulnerability, and uncertainty in the labor market were the key areas that were noted by service providers. For example, one service provider noted that clients who already face multiple barriers seem to demonstrate less resilience and more anxiety around COVID-19. Another service provider explained that the shifting labor market, which has added a complex layer to most businesses, the physical distancing, PPE, and having to think about another layer of accommodation, is particularly challenging for employers. So what we saw from these open-ended insights was that it's not only job seekers with disabilities who are disengaging from employment, but it's actually also employers that seem more hesitant to hire people with disabilities in the current climate. So these results suggest that additional supports for both the employers and job seekers are needed to ensure a safe environment during COVID-19. These results suggest that the pandemic has actually exacerbated this gap between job seekers with disabilities and their employers. And the findings suggest that with BC Win's approach of offering adaptable supports to both job seekers and inclusive employers, that we can help fill the gap in this employment sector. So some of the lessons learned from the survey highlight the need to adapt to the reality of COVID-19, that it's not just business as usual, but rather that employers require further supports to adjust their approaches in engaging with people during the pandemic. And this persistence of the pandemic requires an understanding of how job seekers are engaging currently, and a shift to more longer term thinking that this pandemic isn't going away right now. And we've seen that there's concerns around personal safety and job security present real barriers for job seekers with disabilities. And there's a need to take extra steps right now to address these underlying concerns. The pandemic presents an opportunity to change approaches and prepare job seekers for these in-demand positions when recruitment resumes and when they're ready to get back to work.
Thanks, Laura. So this survey was just completed, and you're seeing some of these results as they're really being analyzed by our team here. But we think this is such an important time to share out what we're learning and what some of the steps that we're taking as a team here to take messages from the survey, hear from our employer partners, hear from job seekers and our service partners about how best to move forward. And we feel that BC Win is in a really good position to take action based on these results, and because we are able to sort of serve the intermediary role between employers and job seekers and make some key adjustments. For job seekers, what this means is that we plan to determine which employment opportunities are suitable for remote work arrangements. Then we will identify and facilitate the technical requirements and capacity among our employer partners to ensure that people with disabilities will be well prepared and supported to perform their tasks safely and effectively. For employers, BC Win will conduct accessibility reviews of their current recruitment practices to build current and future capacity to attract job seekers during and following the pandemic. We will also work with employers to determine how to attract people with disabilities over the coming months when there still is a concern about heightened risk to personal and workplace safety. And finally, we'll be looking at developing customized online training for cohorts of people with disabilities. This is a long-term approach to help prepare them for jobs that are expected to be in demand as recruitment resumes. We're looking forward to taking these next steps to support employers and job seekers with disabilities during these unprecedented times. While the results of this survey are really about helping inform our approach, but we hope that this has been helpful for you as you think about how COVID-19 is impacting people that you may serve, people you may be employing. We want to thank you for your time today, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have for us during the Q&A.
Okay, hi, I'm Lacey Croft, and joining me by phone is my colleague, Elisabeth Harrison.
Hi, everybody.
Our co-author, Carla Rice, is unfortunately unable to join us today, but we are two members of the I2I project, a SSHRC-funded insight grant hosted by the Revision Center at the University of Guelph. The project is led by Dr. Donna Lero and Dr. Carla Rice. It aims to improve social, economic, and employment opportunities for people in Ontario with episodic disabilities, which are long-term health conditions characterized by periods of good health and interrupted by periods of illness and disability that are unpredictable and variable in severity. The project utilizes surveys, interviews, and digital storytelling workshops with employers and workers. Worker participants in this research have a wide range of physical, neurological, and mental health conditions associated with episodic disability.
So our project began in the pre-COVID-19 era, and prior to the pandemic, we had heard workers with episodic disabilities describing some successes with accommodation and inclusion, but unfortunately, many more frustrations and barriers. And this was not surprising. The literature shows that workplace and income replacement policies and practices often exclude those with episodic disabilities due to the fluctuating and unpredictable nature of their conditions. And this results in high rates of unemployment and underemployment, as well as inadequate income. In this presentation, we draw from some of our employee interviews and a digital story to illustrate a finding that we had not initially anticipated. In interviews taking place during the pandemic, participants discussed their feelings of stress and sorrow, but they also described the pandemic as an opportunity to revolutionize access to work and income support for people with episodic disabilities. The COVID-19 crisis has revealed that the kinds of modifications that facilitate the inclusion of people with episodic disabilities are the same changes that have enabled us to adjust to the unexpected challenge of the pandemic. We argue that episodic disability-friendly policies promote inclusion as well as beneficial resilience, helping us to keep moving forward together in unforeseen circumstances.
Flexibility in scheduling and the location of work are the most commonly required accommodations across a broad range of episodic disability conditions. As a participant we spoke to with depression and PTSD explained, I would like to see a lot more. If you need to work from home today, you can do that. Or a lot more flexibility in attendance, because sometimes you don't need to go all the way in and commute and spend all that extra time to travel to a physical location if you can do the same thing at home, because that helps a lot when I would have really bad flare-ups. Yet until the COVID crisis happened, these kinds of accommodations have often been resisted by employers. As another participant shared, I was struggling with depression. I called in sick and my boss called my cell phone with a long ranting message about, I'm going to get a second warning for absenteeism. Better get myself sorted out and come with a doctor's note if I miss another day. even though it was office policy that you can miss 3 days without a note. An employer's refusal to accommodate can have devastating consequences for workers with episodic disabilities. One participant with severe multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, lost her career in a health-related field after her employer successfully argued that they were not obligated to accommodate her request to work from home. Recent experience has shown us that flexible policies are possible. As the participant with MCS explained, working from home could have allowed her to continue in her career. In 2018, I was still fighting for an accommodation to protect my health. With MCS, I need a fragrance-free environment. My previous employer wasn't willing to educate staff or enforce a policy, so I was trying to work from home, which they seemed to not think was doable. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I settled in 2019 and a year later, it's COVID and everyone is working from home. How cruel is that?
Employers also benefit from creating flexibility in scheduling and location of work. Flexible work arrangements improve employee satisfaction, productivity, and retention. And additionally, flexible work arrangements reduce absenteeism and presenteeism. People who cannot modify their work are more likely to engage in presenteeism while ill, which poses risks to coworkers and managers with chronic illnesses and contributes to this annual $16.6 billion cost to employers. We found that most employed participants in our project worked in the kinds of settings that could allow flexibility, with several participants reporting that frontline location-dependent jobs would actually be inaccessible to them. Despite this, we know that some people with episodic disability conditions do, in fact, work in frontline jobs that would be less amenable to these modifications. Beyond the pandemic, a flexible approach to work allows employers to better address equity and inclusion, as well as to position themselves to deal with future adverse events, such as those forecast to result from climate change. Flexibility allows workers and employers to adapt to crises.
Workers with chronic health conditions also need nimble and robust income replacement programs. The creation of CRB and enhanced EI demonstrate the capacity for income replacement programs that are more accessible and provide adequate income support. Yet the rollout of these programs did not account for the situation of many people with disabilities. Despite the financial pressures caused by the pandemic, disability income replacement programs have retained their rigid eligibility parameters and unlivable income levels. One participant explained how ODSP requirements do not account for the unpredictable nature of episodic disabilities. When you look at episodic disabilities, those are not necessarily consistent, where ODSP wants consistency. I have colleagues with epilepsy who had to fight to get back on because you didn't have a seizure for, say, 5 months or something, you're okay, but it's episodic, so it's unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to happen. Several participants in our study suggested that a universal basic income program akin to CRB could potentially address the problems of ineligibility and inadequacy that characterize current disability income supports. As one participant mentioned, as a policy thing, I would really love a basic income for everyone because, first of all, it would make things easier when shit goes sideways. Second of all, it would mean that people who get sick, like regular people, cold sick, don't show up with their germs and bring them to me as an immunosuppressed person and make me sick for multiple weeks on end. Research on UBI shows that people living on a low income benefit substantially from access to income support, reporting improvements in health, work participation, access to food and housing and social relationships. Anecdotal reports suggest that CRB has been similarly helpful for some recipients. Despite this hopeful outlook for the future of work with episodic disability, the pandemic has also exacerbated inequality in myriad ways. Due to the impacts of structural racism, racialized people are both more likely to be exposed to the virus that causes COVID and more likely to suffer complications and death. Older people and those with chronic illness are increasingly facing the ableist expectations of taking on the burden of shielding while reopening takes place. Moreover, the COVID crisis is causing and further exacerbating episodic disabilities, such as mental health difficulties among essential workers. Systemic sexism is setting back women's gains in employment rates as much as a generation. These losses disproportionately impact disabled, racialized, immigrant, and lower income women.
Revision-centered digital storytelling workshops disrupt research power dynamics by allowing investigators to engage in story creation alongside participants. The following clip is from The New Normal, a story by researchers Carla and Hannah Fowley. In the clip, Rice and Fowley share their responses to news of the intersecting negative impacts of the pandemic in the academy and beyond. The images shown in the clip include a photo of hands layered with morphing details from Van Gogh's painting The Starry Night.
Of course, this low-grade gnawing discomfort with its distressing spikes, the state of heightened invulnerability is nothing compared to the ableism, racism, ageism, all the isms that have crystallized in the eugenic triaging of life on the front lines, in the statistics reported about who precisely is losing their livelihoods and their lives. And yet, it is also true that responses to the pandemic in and around the academic world are exacerbating and further entrenching the mangle of inequities, including the gendered hostility and more garden variety sexism that structure our institutional relations in the best of post-feminist times. As women academics continue to do the invisible service and relational labor that keeps our institutions running, and men overwhelmingly apply for COVID-19 rapid response research grants and submit papers for peer review, the equity winds seem to melt away like the polar ice caps. And so my pulse quickens every time I read these posts and think about the after, when our collective suspension ends and things get back to normal. And I escalate into a panic again about the multiple and contradictory ways that the new normal is being shaped by the now.
Resilience is often defined as the capacity to return to normal following adversity. But as we have seen, normal has excluded so many people with episodic disabilities from work and income, and has made oppressed people so much more vulnerable to the impacts of COVID-19 itself and to the economic crisis that has accompanied it. Resilience can be an obstacle to positive change, pulling us back toward the status quo. A beneficial, resilient response necessitates learning from what has occurred and making changes to mitigate the impact of future shocks. For the many people in Ontario and across Canada who have episodic disabilities, and for those who face intersecting marginalization, it is necessary to find ways to do things differently. And that makes the pandemic a unique opportunity to create a much more inclusive new normal.